Hi, good morning, good afternoon, no matter where you are. Can you all hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, so our presentation is about to begin. This presentation will be recorded and will last about 60 minutes. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation. And if you have any question, comment, please feel free to share it in the chat during the presentation. All participants in today's event will have access to the recorded version, which will be available a week after the live event. Okay, so my name is Qing Lin. I'm the current chair of the B-MEIS, Bilingual Multilingual Intersection, a TESOL International Association's intersection. On behalf of the B-MEIS, I want to welcome all of you to our monthly webinar dedicated to reimagining by multilingual education in today's changing language landscapes. Today's webinar is titled Fostering Home-School Connection when TESOL Professionals Double Up as Parents of Multilingual Children. Our speaker today are Dr. Clara Bowler, who is also our chair-elect, Dr. Mingxuan Wu, Dr. Adrian Kwaku, Dr. Nalufer Gula, Dr. Stephanie Abraham. Again, my name is Qing Lin, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Before we start, a few words about today's topic. In the past few months, many important shifts have happened in education. And one is the blur boundary of the home and school. As a result of COVID-19, teachers shift to teach students remotely from home, where parents are usually present during the remote learning. So many have argued that this new home and school connection has offered an opportunity to challenge the boundary between the monolingual ideology at the school and the plurilingual practice at home, and provide us an opportunity to work together in developing positive disposition toward multilingual languages. In the search for creative ways to support the multilingualism, we would like to dedicate this webinar to exploring possible ways to strengthen home and school connection in developing multilingualism. Okay, there are 3 questions we want to focus on today. Okay, what was the first question? Yes, okay, thank you. So the first question is, what has it been like to work in the field of second language acquisition, bilingualism, and raising multilingual children? What are the tensions? What is helpful? The second question, in what way does your research inform your bilingualism, multilingualism at home? What are the tips you would like to share with other parents? Number 3, have a COVID-19 and racial justice movement impacted how you raise your children and your philosophies on doing so? I will ask one question at a time, and due to the constraint of time, each speaker will only have 3 minutes to address each question. Okay, I'm going to start with the first question, all right? What has it been like to work in the field of second language and bilingualism and raising multilingual children? What are the tensions and what is helpful? And for this question, we will go around alphabetically by the last name. So Dr. Stephanie Abraham, what are your thoughts on these questions?
Hello, buenos dias, everyone. I'm talking to you from Oaxaca, Mexico. It's really beautiful here this morning. So my thoughts on this question is, I guess it was going back to my childhood and thinking about how I grew up in a monolingual home, a white working class monolingual home in North Georgia. It was coming into the field of bilingualism, multilingual education, and second language acquisition that I think has really given me the confidence and knowledge in knowing that I can raise a child who is bilingual or multilingual. So I think that's one of the things that that it has helped me do as a parent. It has also given me some knowledge in responding to the already racist comments that my child receives about him or to me, that he needs to speak more English, or that he's behind. I'm usually able to respond to those comments calmly and saying that I know the research and I know what it says, that he will be fine, and that being bilingual is better than being monolingual. And at the end, it'll all work out. So I think giving me those knowledge to be able to respond to those things without worrying about them myself as a parent has been really helpful. Another thing I think that this has done working in this field is I study a lot of the research on family language policies and how parents decide to raise their child bilingually, who's going to speak what, when they're going to speak it. And so I know that there's a lot of research that documents that people often have very strict language policies, and that's well documented in the literature. But reading that has made me realize that I don't have to have a strict language policy, and that I don't worry about it so much, and that I just focus on him as a language speaker of a lot of languages. And so we use all of our languages very flexibly in the home, and I don't try to police the languages when we're at home. Some other things that I wanted to talk about, the tensions. Sometimes when I read the research that says that people are very strict in their language policy, especially for the non-dominant language in their context, like they'll say things like, I only speak Spanish to my child at home, and this is in a US context. He only has books in Spanish at home. We don't speak any English, and these are for very young children. I think that has made me concerned that I'm not speaking enough Spanish to him. And for the first couple of years of his life, he's only 4 now, just so everyone knows, has the context. I did speak only Spanish to him. And, I started to want to read to him in English because I had books that I loved when I was a child that I wanted to read to him. So again, I let go of that strictness on that I needed to keep one language only, and that he's going to be bilingual and he's going to have at least 2 languages that are his. And so I did feel some tension there about that non-dominant language around year 2 of his life, and I've let it go since then. Anyway, that's my answer to that first question.
Thank you. Dr. Paula?
Hi, everyone. So Dr. Abraham said that she's speaking from Mexico. I'm speaking from Brazil. I am in Brazil right now. And it's nice to see that we are all in different places of the world. I saw in the chat, so hello, everyone. This question is really dear to me because I think all of us in this panel and probably the audience will live this every day. I think that what led me to being in this field was my passion for languages and multilingualism in general. And then every day I'm confronted with, like Dr. Abraham said, prejudice against how I'm raising my children bilingually. And most of what I do is informed by research. So it's interesting to see that mismatch between what is popularly believed as good for bilingual children and what it means to be bilingual, and what you do as an informed parent, right? That is constantly researching, and so there's that tension. And I like what Dr. Abraham said about her own tension. Should I only speak in Spanish? Because you have that tension of people telling you should only speak in Spanish. In my case, it's Portuguese. My children are 7 and 4 right now, and that happened a lot with my 7-year-old that is now speaking a lot more Portuguese than I believed he would be, because we kept the firm belief that children, they translanguage and code switch all the time. And that's what all the research says. And we kept with that policy, let's say, in our family. I would say there wasn't a lot of policy, but informed practices and really using the language and talking in the language. And then there was a moment that I said, oh my gosh, are my children going to speak the 2 languages? And it's amazing that it's flourishing. And I want them to be confident and feel empowered by that multilingual, bilingual knowledge, not feel that restrained or shut down when they try to say something and maybe something comes up with an accent, or perceived as wrong, right? So I think there is that tension every day in our practice as parents.
Thank you. Dr. Gula?
Hello to everybody from Kansas City. I have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. So my kids, they're at different age levels. So when I was raising my first child in the United States, I made sure I only spoke to him, Turkish for 3 years, because I knew that even though his first language would be Turkish, his native language would be English once he starts school. And, it was true, but I tried to make sure, again, according to research, you need to make sure they are fluent in one language while learning the second language. I made sure they were reading and writing in Turkish before they start reading and writing in English. So he started reading when he was 3, I believe. It is very important to remember, as a parent and as a TESOL researcher, to remember that, they translate those skills, those literacy skills into their second language. So it has been very unique to be a TESOL mom because, my kid started school and he was silent. He was literally quiet. And I was worried, and I told myself, he's not talking in the classroom. He's not sharing any ideas. He's just observing. He comes back home and tells me everything, but he doesn't respond. And I said, oh, this is silent period. I just recalled it, right? And I talked to the teacher and I, provided her with some insight. This is silent period and he might be silent up to 6 months. And it is normal. After 6 months, people will be worried. And she said she didn't know about it. So it was a wonderful communication as a parent, and teacher. And we followed him more carefully. And I shared with her that, even though he's linguistically silent, he's psychologically very active. So he's trying to understand if this new environment is safe. And this was, at his preschool. When he started kindergarten, he had some other Turkish students around him, 2 more. And he was a language broker. They couldn't understand. He was translating. And it was, even though the teacher thought it was a burden on him, I said, no, don't worry about it. Research tells us that it is a big progress mentally, cognitively for him. He's switching between the languages, between the concepts, and helping somebody is good. So this was the second, communication between the teacher, and it continued. And I ended up writing a paper on my, son's language development and collaborating with the teacher. The tensions, my research focuses on perceptions of teachers on English language learners, culturally and linguistically diverse students. And unfortunately, research is not very pleasant. Some of the teachers, they just do not want to have English language learners in their classrooms because it is a lot of work for them, right? They need to, make sure they understand the context. It is another layer of work for them and they don't want it. Some other teachers, they want to have those students, they want to help those students, but they don't know how, and they use different and sometimes wrong methods to teach those students. So it was a tension for me. I tried to make sure, even though it wasn't followed at school, I was following the right steps to teach him the content and the language. And, reading current literature, following, even being part of the TESOL, chat group, was very helpful for me. What other parents were doing. Sometimes I heard very unique ideas, and I, shared it with my son. We did the activities. So always talking and with people, sharing your concerns and learning from them and following the literature is very important because each day we learn something more about cognitive development and language development of the students.
Thank you, Dr. Gula. Dr. Kwaku?
All right, thank you, Ching Ching. I just want to take just a few seconds to thank you and all the people who helped you make this conversation possible. I also want to thank the panelists for participating in this important conversation. I come from a multilingual background. I'm from the Ivory Coast, and the country. Well, we're a French-speaking country, right? As per the colonization period. But we also have our, local languages. The Ivory Coast alone has up to 60 different, languages spoken in different regions of the country. So for me, being bilingual or multilingual came kind of naturally. So when I came to the United States, I had my first child. And this idea of remaining connected to the culture and to the linguistic background led me to speak to her essentially in French, so she could at least have something from her father's background. Now I have to point out that my wife is from here, so basically in the household there were probably 4 or 5 of us. Everybody talked to her in English, and I was the only person who spoke to her in French. So, the experience is kind of, connected to what Nilofer said, that her son, it took quite some time for the son to start speaking. And it was exactly the same experience for my daughter. She didn't speak, normal at the around the period where other kids, I would say normal kids, where other kids normally start speaking. But when she did start, her first words were in French. She would say papa, she would say mama. And when I sent her to do something, I would say it in French, and she would just, go ahead and do it. So, my point of, my thinking was for her to grow into the language, to grow up, bilingual, instead of, growing up and learning the language. I'm convinced, and the research supports it, that, the sooner you begin, the better, right? And she was immersed within the language, in both languages. So I guess what was happening is when she was processing the 2 languages, not quite knowing which one to use first, and whether she was debating which language to use or not. But her speech was kind of delayed. Now, talking about tensions, I guess the biggest tension was the way my wife saw things, right? For her, this was, English was the language, right? And so, Kaylin had, my daughter's name, Kaylin had to speak English. And so at some point, whenever Kaylin would say papa, mama, and all those French words, she started discouraging her. Eventually, I continued talking to her in French, hoping that she would, keep speaking. At least if she didn't speak French, that at least she could understand what I was telling her. Eventually, it all went away altogether. Right. So I would say one of the tensions is, parental understanding of the necessity of a child speaking more than one language, right? In that sense, I would say maybe communicating better and helping the other parent understand the necessity for the child to speak more than language, the benefits of speaking more than one language, and kind of evolving into cultures is something that needs to be discussed with the other partner. Now, just to circle back to the beginning of the question, now before becoming a teacher, I never planned to become an English teacher. So basically, I learned English from as somebody who grew up in the French system. I learned English as a second language, and then I went on to college and studied English. So I have a degree in English from the Ivory Coast. Now, I wanted to become a translator. So I was going to be some kind of, language specialist or language professional. But in the summer, one summer, I taught summer school in the Ivory Coast, and I really liked it. And you know, my passion for teaching started then. That was back in the early 1990s. And 1991, I started my first job as an English teacher. For me, what keeps me going is this idea of being able to not just help somebody acquire another language, but you know, in the Ivory Coast context, to help them prepare for the exams. They do have 2 oral exams in high school, one after 4 years as they move on to the second part of high school. That would be high school. But in middle school, at the end of middle school, they have to take an oral exam and a written exam in English. So being able to prepare them to take those exams and, you know, at the same time, giving them the opportunity to practice another language, I think that was important to me. And that's what kept me, going. And then when I came to the US, I joined I joined CUNY, and the focus kind of changed. The focus here now in the CUNY Language Immersion Program is essentially on reading and writing to prepare, you know, our students for college. So it's all very interesting for me. It's been very rewarding just to see my students move on to other good things.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Wu?
Thank you, Qing. Hello, everybody. I'm speaking from Taiwan. I raised 2 girls in the United States. They are 7 and 9. So I grew up in a multilingual household. So multilingualism has been a norm for me. But SOA has really helped me learn how to provide linguistic and emotional support to my kids. So linguistically speaking, my children were exposed to multiple languages since they were really young. And I always make sure that they were given enough time to learn, to grow, and to process their thoughts. I didn't expect them to be as verbally expressive as their multilingual peers when they were little. So now both of them are in elementary school. Given that they spend time engaging themselves in multiple languages after school, I don't compare them to their monolingual counterparts in terms of their English development. After all, the bilingual is not 2 monolingual in one person. And in reality, it's actually really rare to find balanced bilinguals who have high proficiencies in all domains in both languages. So for me, raising perfect bilinguals is never my goal. So SLA really helps me to be more patient with or less anxious about my kids' language development. It also helped me to stay optimistic about their language development. I know that it's never too late to learn a new language. When there's enough input, output, and the kids can find connection to the language, they will learn it eventually. And emotionally speaking, when my kids made errors, I try to let them know that errors help they learn. And new language uses were being created by people every day, everywhere. I want them to be willing to take risks when learning languages. So we embrace the idea of experimenting with languages and be creative with languages. In terms of the tension that I experience as a parent of multilingual children is that this is a really long and lonely journey. Overall, the elementary schools in the US still pay very little attention to fostering students' learning of other languages. When the school in general do not foster bilingualism among their students, parents need to really fight for time, space, resources to help their kids become multilingual. And lastly, if we are talking about raising not just bilingual, but also bicultural kids, the challenge is even bigger because of the Eurocentric school curriculum, English only or anti-immigrant ideologies in the society. And I'm still grappling with these challenges on a daily basis, and the struggle is real. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your diverse perspective on raising multilingual children. For the next question, we're going to dive deeper into this topic. Okay, so in what way does your research inform your bilingualism, multilingualism at home? What are tips you will share with other parents? This time I will go around alphabetically by the first name. So Clara, so you will be the first one.
I wanted to say, wow, these are amazing perspectives. And Dr. Wu, thank you. You're so always so insightful in your responses because it really captured what I wanted to say. I don't know if I can say anything else after Dr. Wu's response. She was amazing. I think I'm gonna build on what Dr. Wu was saying because I feel that I really love what she said about second language acquisition research helping us being more patient with our child's development, right? And I think that was mentioned from all the panelists mentioned that. The thing is that this tension of the school and what the school requires from our children and what we know is right for their development is really a struggle. And I agree this struggle is real and we are always living. So the tips that I have to give for parents, if I can, because I'm still learning as a parent too, is that really, really be patient and believe in what you think is right, because there are so many variables to learning a language. There's no right method. I know popular belief wants to promote that there is the right method, the most effective, the fastest, but the truth is that learning a language takes time. And this idea of perfection is really in the way of learning languages, but because learning languages, culture, language diversity is imperfect, right? It's not perfect because we are not perfect, and that's the beauty of being humans. So embracing that imperfection is something that has helped me moving forward. Now, I think this way, and that's how I move as a parent. But I am in constant tension with my family, what they believe. And I think Etienne said something about his wife, right? That there were struggles there. So not with my husband, but with my family. Like my family is always correcting my children. They say that they don't speak any language really well. And this all stems from a really misinformed view of what bilingual and multilingualism is. So I struggle with that every day because I don't want my children to internalize those perspectives. I want them to think that they are free to use their powers, and I encourage them every time that they say something, because I think bilingual children, they should be encouraged and celebrated when they say things instead of shut down because their accent is this or because they made a mistake. And there is, as Dr. Wu mentioned, the tension with school. So right now, in spite of the fact that, yes, I agree that we are having more time to speak our home languages with our children. On the other hand, they are also having full remote learning at home, in my case, and the school is at home. So I spend considerable time with the school curriculum that is in English, for example. So I think that there's also that tension that I need to balance the homeschool process of this with the, sorry everyone, and the home environment nurturing the home languages.
Thank you. Etienne? Etienne, you are muted.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, I have to say, I haven't had, you know, much experience in terms of, you know, bilingual research, but as a second language acquisition researcher, I do believe in, and I already said it, I do believe in starting the kids very early, right? The younger they are, the easier it's for them to acquire the language. So for me, acquisition is key, right? So, you know, you want to start as early as possible. Now, in my case, with my first daughter, with the daughter that was born here, it was much easier because, you know, she was growing up. She kind of was growing up in the language, right? My older daughter was born in the Ivory Coast, and she joined me when she was about 16 years already. 16 years old. So in the Ivory Coast educational system, students learn English as part of the curriculum once they start secondary school. And by the completion of secondary school, which lasts 7 years in the French system, they will have had at least 7 years of English at the rate of 3 hours a week. with more specialization when they start the last 3 years of high school. So now, so tips for parents. I would say, you know, if you have really young kids, you know, what you want to do is you know, if you are in a bilingual household, for example, a husband speaks one language and the wife speaks another language, you know, it's good to practice both language or to talk to the kid in both languages. Eventually, the kid will grow up picking up elements of both languages. And if this is difficult, well, you know, what comes to my mind, if this is difficult, you know, I think parents need to sit down and have a conversation. They need to, you know, discuss the importance of the kid learning two languages. Languages are the channel through, you know, which our cultures are expressed, right? So, you know, there's this interconnection between culture and language. So, you know, a kid speaking two languages is not just acquiring the language, the kid's also acquiring the cultures and, you know, acquiring the elements to talk about different cultures that, you know, are represented by their parents. So another thing that I'm thinking about in terms of tips, you know, I think in a broader sense, right, advocacy is very important. For parents, I think, I'm not sure if it was Nilofer or well, I think it was Ming Swan who was talking about the challenges and, you know, the difficulties children have in some elementary school, right? The way the programs are set up do not necessarily promote learning another language. Now, I just want to reference this gentleman who works at the as a French culture and education attaché at the French embassy here in New York. His name is Fabrice Jomon, and he has actually started a movement called the Bilingual Revolution. And, you know, as I speak, there are many, you know, bilingual schools, not just French and English, but I mean, you know, when you think about Spanish and English, those schools are, you know, there are numerous schools in New York City already because of the, you know, the high percentage of, you know, parents who speak Spanish as a first language from, you know, parents from Hispanic countries. But what Fabrice does, he you know, basically, you know, he runs workshops and, you know, conferences to kind of promote the importance, to speak about the importance of, you know, kids learning different languages. And I'm also thinking about the not bilingual, but the heritage languages, right? Those are, you know, parents who came here. They have kids who were probably born in their countries. They come here, and for some reason, the kids start neglecting the languages, right? Their home languages. So at some point, they start losing those languages. So what we did in the heritage language, which is also administered by the French embassy here in New York, they had an after-school program, and the students will come, and you know, they had several teachers who would prepare them not just to take the regents, but there's also, I think, a specialized exam in French as well. So we prepared them for those different exams, but at the same time, we help them kind of keep something from, you know, the linguistic background, and which, you know, as I stated earlier, is tied into the culture. So definitely, you know, it was for us a way to help them maintain their home language and also some elements of the culture that their parents came from.
Thank you, Etienne. Ming?
Yes, and thank you, Etienne, for paving the way for me to talk about heritage language education. So my research on that suggests that when learners have positive identification with their heritage, they don't resist learning their heritage language as much. So at home, I try to create not just linguistically rich, but also culturally rich environment for my kids to learn about their heritage. And over time, I have realized that the goal is more about immersing them in the heritage culture, and language is a tool to achieve that. So most importantly, I view culture as fluid rather than static. So I focus more on the contemporary than ancient static cultural practices. My kids spend quite some time learning about what contemporary people in Taiwan do through TV shows or pop music. We live near to New York City, so my kids love going to Flushing and Queens on weekends to eat soup dumpling, drink bubble tea, and take their Chinese yo-yo classes with other Asian American teenagers. For them, their heritage culture is something that people actually live with, have fun with, rather than just existing in the past or in the textbooks. So my other work on weekend language schools also indicate that these weekend schools oftentimes become sites for tensions, and they might not work for some families. A full-day language learning experience on weekends doesn't work well as compared to learning the language for 10 to 15 minutes every day. So while my kids don't go to weekend schools, they spend smaller chunk of time during weekdays doing language-related tasks, such as reading, watching TV, cartoon, or doing karaoke. What I have learned along the way is that fostering appreciation of the heritage culture sometimes is more important than fostering linguistic development among children. So again, it's never too late to learn a language. But when a child shows resistance of learning a language, it could counteract all the effort that we put into learning it. And what is worse is that it's totally possible for children to lose the language that they were most familiar with when they were little. So my piece of advice for parents is to be patient with children's linguistic development, especially when they are still young, and also be encouraging. And do not evaluate multilingual children against monolingual children. Encourage output in all languages available to the children, and including code switching.
Thank you, Ming. Nalufer?
Thank you. My kids are studying at the United States, in the United States at an American school. And I want them to learn about their, parents' culture, if I may say, because when I ask my kids, they tell me I am a Turkish American, an American with Turkish, roots. And I really like that. They do not deny their Turkish roots, but they embrace their, culture. I'm really interested in psychology as well. So psychology and bilingualism and multilingualism inform each other here. Instead of telling them to read a, book, I start reading it and tell them, oh, this is a new book released in Turkey. Would you like to read it? I really like this section. I share the sections and I encourage them to, my elder son, he's an avid reader. He loves reading. I encourage him to read the books that are popular in the, in Turkey right now, in the culture right now. We listen to music together and never forget that they have a taste. So I follow their taste in music. We try to visit, our country. My husband is from Turkey as well. So we try to make sure that we visit the country regularly. It is also very important. And research tells us that, they can transfer their literacy skills. Most of the English language learners, cultural and linguistically diverse students in the United States, they struggle with understanding readings, understanding, science and math questions. So I try to make sure in whatever language they want to read, they read, and we practice those literacy skills. It is very, very important because once you learn a language, you learn the concepts as well. When you develop different and several concepts, you can approach readings and questions from a different angle, which will be very helpful for them, which is very helpful for them, for their academic language. And also understanding that it's a hard task, right? You know, you are learning two languages, you are learning the content in a new language, and you come back home and you switch cultures. So I share with them sometimes, you know, I point out, it is explicit teaching moment, you know, you did a great job switching cultures. I really appreciated how you greeted those Turkish people, so that they can pay attention to their skills as well, because sometimes we subconsciously acquire some skills, but it is really easy to forget them. If we don't use the language, we forget it. If we don't use some cultural skills, we forget them as well. So explicitly point out them their skills and how much I appreciate it. Sometimes the opposite. You should have done this. You missed it this time. Can you be more careful? These are explicit teaching moments.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. Yes, I guess just to follow up on everyone's great comments about how your research informs how you raise your children bilingually. I was going to talk just a little bit about my own research and how that has impacted the way we practice bilingualism in our home. So my current research project is at a community-based literacy center in Philadelphia called Mighty Writers. And it's a bilingual space. It targets the Latinx community of South Philadelphia. So it's a diverse community with people having connections to Central America, Mexico, South America. Lots of different kinds of Spanishes are spoken. English is spoken. Some other languages that I may not know are also spoken there. But anyways, the point is that when I was collecting my data there at this research site, I was exploring the translanguaging nature of the site. I didn't have childcare, so I just took my baby with me. And because it wasn't necessarily a school, I could do that. And so while I was teaching, working, observing with the children and the parents there in this translanguaging space, he was just on the floor there crawling around, also kind of taking up this translingual nature of language. And what I mean by that is that if I could just share an example of some of the little guys that go there. They were and currently are obsessed with Pokemon. And these were Latino children who spoke mostly Spanish at home, English at school, a mix of both in the community, and also both when they were at the center. But their Pokemon videos were in Japanese, and they would read the subtitles, sometimes in Spanish and sometimes in English, and they would talk about what these words meant, and they would intermix some Japanese within there. And I just thought about, wow, look at the complexity of that. So two things that came out of that work that is still ongoing at Mighty Writers is I stopped worrying about trying to separate languages, and I stopped worrying about trying to correct language practices, especially for these very young children. And another thing is it made me realize that I needed to create these authentic, positive experiences around the language, which everyone has touched on at this point, is that learning a language can't be punitive. It can't be a punishment or forced onto people or onto children. They have to want to do it. So you need to find ways, whatever that's like in your home, that makes it positive and enjoyable. And so that goes into my advice for parents is to, if you're in a place where you're correcting languages, is to just stop and to just think about how can you just let them be in the language and just enjoy their new constructions of language and think about why do they say it that way? How did that come about? And that can give you some opportunities to talk about their language constructions with them if they're at that point in their life. My child is not there yet. I just listened to how he constructs new words and I'm just like, how did he get that word? It's just amazing. And then another example, yesterday, we're going to get into what we're doing now because of the pandemic, but like we're doing school and he's just not into it. And we're doing some letters and reading some books and he doesn't want to do it. He wanted to bowl. Okay, so I'm like, okay, let's do bowling. And then I tell him what they're called in English, and he asked me, he goes, ¿En español? And I was like, oh God, I don't know how to say bowling pin in Spanish. So there I am, you know, Googling the word, trying to figure out how to say it in Spanish. But by the end of that afternoon, he was talking to his dad about bowling in Spanish. So it's just kind of letting it go. Let's do what you want to do. And there's always language learning opportunities attached with those fun things that they want to do. Okay, that was my advice.
Thank you for sharing your research-informed tips and strategies. Okay, the last question is a difficult question for many parents who live in this challenging time. Okay, have COVID-19 and racial justice movements impact how you raise your children and your philosophy on doing so? Okay, for this question, I will go around alphabetically by their affiliation. So Dr. Wu from Adelphi University. So you will be the first one to share your thoughts. Yes.
I really appreciate that this question is raised here, and I appreciate the space, the time to elaborate that. So at the very beginning of the pandemic in February, a third grader student in my daughter's class went around to all Asian students in the class and asked them where they were originally from. The student's intention is to check if those who look Asian are coming from China, and if so, they should go back to China. So I decided later to bring this to the attention to the principal as well as the local community, urging parents to be mindful about how they talk about the coronavirus at home. I encourage parents in my community to take some time to talk to their kids, not just about the hygiene habits, but also the escalating Islamophobia and anti-Asian sentiment that might affect many students in schools. So ever since then, I become more active on social media in my local community, just to raise awareness related to biases and stereotypes. I share with my kids what I learned from the bystander intervention workshop that I purposely signed up for. We openly talk about how different groups were affected by the pandemics and why the racial tensions across the US have escalated to a new high. So part of my own work looks at interracial friendships between Asian and African American students. And I also share the finding from my work with my kids, because I'm a firm believer that it's never too early to talk about these issues with young children. And this actually become even more urgent during this difficult time. So if I may, I would really make a suggestion and proposal that we all start from our own household and start to engage our own children or friends in this conversation and then talk about it, because not talking about it would just pay this lip service to the minority students.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Dr. Paula from Adelphi University.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Wow, this is such an important topic, and I have to say that with Dr. Wu and I work closely together, and in working with her, I became so aware of so many things. And I think that as researchers in bilingual and second language acquisition, we are very keen on culturally responsive education. But I have to be honest, I have never tied that to specific racial justice movements, because I felt that I was already doing it by doing culturally responsive education. So I have to say that I began my racial journey this year. Like, it was enlightening to really place race at the center of so many issues that intersect with language, right, in language learning. So even with my children now, I am more aware, I think, and more alert with who we are when we are in New York, for example, and they are in school. And then when we are in Brazil, it shifts. And that's why it's so hard too, because when you are mixed, right? We are very mixed, our family. We have We have almost everything. That's what we think, many people say in Brazil. So it's hard to pinpoint how we would position ourselves in the different spaces. But I see that my children are always relating in relation to those categories, right? When they go to school, when they interact with other children. So it has been a learning journey for me, and seeing that the linguistic discrimination and racial discrimination are so intimately connected, and being aware of that my children, let's say, if they have an accent or I have an accent, that they have to be aware of what the consequences are, if that's tied to race or not. So it has been really key. So I think that what I would tell other parents is really that take it as a journey too. We're a learning opportunity with our children, because we're all learning and we can learn together.
Thank you. Dr. Kwaku from CUNY.
Yes, thank you, Ching Ching. I'll be very brief on this one because my children are grown already. The younger one, Kaylin, is 19, and since the onset of the pandemic, she's been attending classes from home. That's pretty much what the whole family's been doing. My wife works from home, I work from home, and she takes her classes online. But just to circle back to the racial issues, racial justice movements that are going on now. Well, basically, what we do, we're usually connected through our TV. We watch the news, and we have very informal discussions. My daughter, personally, my daughter is very quiet, and she pretty much knows how to behave when she steps out there. If she gets arrested she's approached by the police or anything like that, she pretty much knows how to handle herself. So, but as far as I think it was Ming Swan who talked about the way her own kids were. People telling her kids to go back to China or wherever. I think we need to be very careful, what we say to young children, right? This is a situation that, it happened, but it's not a reason to, I guess, blame innocent children for that. Kids will internalize things, and who knows what consequence that might have on them in the future. So we need to be very careful. If there are any other teachers out there, just be mindful of how you address your children and how you address the current issues that are, going on in our world.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gula from Rutgers University.
Hi. These issues, racial justice, having that global approach, accepting everybody as who they are. It has been a discussion at our home even before, all of these events, because I am trying to teach my kids that they are part of the culture. Whatever happens, if there is an event that happens, it is not their problem. It is, we live in this culture, we consume this culture, we produce culture, we are part of the culture. So when we read about Martin Luther King, we talk about it. What is our role? When we see something, what do we do? We always talked about this. I think these events just opened up rooms for more discussions. Why is this still happening? This should be something that happened in centuries ago. It should be a historical thing, right? And COVID-19 as well. We talk about our vulnerability and how much we depend on each other. We don't need it. We cannot survive. We cannot enjoy life in a tube by only ourselves. But especially topics like social justice, equality. These cannot happen only when we have some national crisis. Does it make sense? This should be the content of all curriculum, especially multilingual, education curriculum. And once these kind of emergencies and cases happens, our students should have a skill set and dispositions how to stand, how to react to it. No, this cannot, and they should kind of eliminate these little like pops of events in their circles, because they already have the dispositions, they have the mindset, they don't accept that, they accept everybody as who they are. So they will, we won't have this much of a crisis, if I may say. And COVID-19, it is harder for kids who are still in the process of learning English, because learning is socially constructed, right? And language learning is the same. They need to be able to use the language with their friends, with their teachers, in the playground, in the classroom, so on and so forth. So I personally was a bit worried about my son, how is he going to do that? So I am using a lot of tools, external tools. I make sure he's listening to books in addition to reading the books. So I am making sure he's, reading from Epic, and I get help from my son who doesn't have any accent, instead of me who has an accent. So, benefiting all of, I think COVID-19 helped us to see that, okay, we have some other tools. Instead of just sending our kids, then when they're at home, okay, what did you do? What I can add on top of it? We have so many tools, so many opportunities, and we can benefit from those.
Thank you, Dr. Gula. Dr. Stephanie Abraham from Rowan University.
Hi, everyone. So I'll talk about this question in two parts. One about what has happened at home with the pandemic and schooling. So my child was enrolled in supposedly a bilingual preschool when all of this happened. But all along the school had been predominantly teaching in English. And so I realized that it was really bilingual in name only. But when he came home, I see that I was really able to do a bilingual education the way I wanted to do it. And fortunately, my husband acquiesced to all of my requests in terms of teaching him. And so he's the native speaker of Spanish, but he reads to him in English and Spanish. He does what we need to be doing that are good pedagogy at home. So I find that just really freeing. Frustrating because he seems to get bored with us. So I kind of miss preschool in that element. But again, he's only 4, so we're making that work. In terms of the racial justice movements, so I'm really talking about the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. and responding to police violence against Black Americans and Black people in the United States. And so I'm white, and I'm a white woman. My spouse is never raced as white. He's usually raced as indigenous when we're in Mexico, and he's raced as being Mexican when we're in the United States. And I worry about how my child will race himself, and I see him identifying with me as being white at times. He doesn't call me white, he calls me pink. And I know, because I am. And so he calls himself pink, and he won't call himself brown. So I don't know what's happening. I think he's being just literal descriptors of what skin color he sees when he looks at it right now. But another concern that I have is being able to talk about anti-Blackness specifically with very young children. So I'm very good at talking about racism with elementary school age children, and I was an elementary educator, and I'm well versed in critical race theory, critical social theories. But in talking specifically about anti-Blackness with my young child, I don't know what to, I guess, say at this point, or how to label, or even if I should describe things at this point with this very young child. And I think, I don't know, just other questions to pose there about how as a white woman to talk about anti-Blackness within a Latinx community or within a Mexican community where that kind of racism also still exists, has been hard for me to negotiate as well.
That's really tough.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where I am right now on those two questions.
Thank you. Now we will open the floor for questions or comments, since I know there are a lot of expertise in the audience. However, due to the constraint of time, if you can be as brief as possible or limit your question or comment to no more than 1 minute, this way we can allow more participations. To talk, you can just turn on your microphone and talk. And perhaps we can take 2 comments. Are there anyone who would like to comment on some questions? Make comments?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Miriam Velsor, and I work at Adelphi. I'm a speech language pathologist, so I supervise graduate and undergraduate students studying to be speech pathologists. I'm monolingual. I did take a Spanish class last fall because I really want to learn, and I see how hard it is. It's really hard to learn a second language, but I'm going to continue to try. But I guess my question is this. So I work with, and you know, the field of speech language pathology is predominantly white women. We're trying to, there is a move to try and increase that, but as of right now, that's the fact. So I do work with a lot of bilingual families, and I am thinking about when I tell them and how I proceed with my students about what to do. So I've always told them that they absolutely have to maintain their bilingualism, that's very important on many levels. The other thing I have recommended to families typically is that, you know, when they're in school, they can speak English, but at home, really try and speak your native language. And I guess I wanted to see what the panel thinks of that idea, and if they have suggestions for me at all. Thank you.
Hi, Miriam. Can I say something on that? Because I work with a lot of Chinese immigrant communities in Flushing and also in Brooklyn. And what I have learned from working with them is that without the institutional support, it's actually very difficult to maintain their kids' bilingual ability. And even as a middle class women like me, I have so much resources to put together. I still find it's really hard to help my kids achieve bilingual or biliteracy. But I do pause for your message because it's very important. Many of these working class families, they oftentimes don't see the value or benefits of maintaining their heritage language. So I think it's great that you are sending this message to them. And if I may make a suggestion, I would say maybe also directing some resources to them so that they know that, okay, in the library, there are usually library in Queens or Brooklyn, they do have sessions that have Chinese books. But many parents, they usually don't go over there and check out books. Yeah. And also let them know that there's Chinese, English, bilingual therapist, speech therapist that might be available to help them. So directing some resources for them in addition to the positive message that you just sent to them, I think that will work really well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're always willing to the High Weinberg Center at Adelphi, we're always willing to speak to parents if there were ever an opportunity that you wanted us to do a presentation on the importance of bilingualism. That's absolutely something we can do because we do have some resources in print as well to promote that. So thank you. I like the idea of the library. That's wonderful. I didn't think of that.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, because of time, we must conclude today's webinar program. Again, today's presentation was titled Fostering Homeschool Connections when TESOL Professionals Double Up as Parents of Multi-Bilingual Children. A special thank you to our 5 presenters. Also to Ms. Nancy Flores, who has been managing this webinar series for us. And thank you everyone in the audience for your participations. This concludes today's presentation. Please take care, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Great comments and
Sure.
great conversation.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.